Well, it was pretty bad at the beginning, but now I'm doing really good. I said, "What are you doing for you?" She says, "My mom was real sneaky. She started playing different kind of music over the loudspeaker system in our home, and every time that Mozart came on the speaker system, my whole blood pressure went down. I figured out that Mozart helps me. Go figure that." I said, "Now what are you doing, Natalie?" She said, "I loaded my iPad, and every time I feel start being a little bit stressed, I listen to Mozart and it soothes me." What's your child doing to self-soothe? We did that then when they were 2. We got to help them because we now know that one of the highest correlations of dropping out of school and a freshman year, first semester of college. I talked to university professors and I asked them what's going on. They say it's dismal, but they said we've got the best and the brightest coming to us. But what happens is they get their first B plus, or they don't know how to get along with another, and they just are overwhelmed. But those kids who have healthy hobbies and know what to go to, it helps sustain them. Your first thing is, what's going to help your child cope? Once you know that and you've discovered that healthy hobby, make sure it's in his or her bedroom, make sure it's in your home, make sure there's time for his or her to do it. And by the way, make sure it's what your child loves, not what you love. The goal of number one self-confidence is to help your child discover who they are. So let me give you just one little story and we'll move on to number 2. I was dealing with a dad who had 2 really wonderful peak performing kids. He said, "My oldest one, well, I knew he was in high school and he's definitely a technology kind of a kid. He's going straight into electronics and technology. That's his passion." But I was worried about my middle school son. All he talked about was wolves. Wolves. You get a little concerned when your middle school kid's talking about wolves all the time. But one day I said, okay, I'm going to arrange some time for him to talk to a park ranger. He's just going to go and I'm just going to sit there and listen. I'm so glad I did, because I sat there listening to my child politely correct the park ranger about stats about wolves. He was so passionate about them. That was my moment to say, that's who my kid is. Biology 101. I've been trying to gear him into going into the law like me. That's not who he is. Number 1 is, who's your child? That's the benchmark for beginning of resilience. If you don't know, don't worry. When you're all done, your school is going to give you core asset survey of 150 skills and strengths of kids. Your kid's not going to be good in all of that, but it's a wonderful little time for you to look through the survey and take a moment to say, I've overlooked that one in my kid, or that's who he is. Oh my gosh, I've got to make sure that she spends more time doing that. That's the benchmark. Write down one thing you want to remember, and that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to keep going through, what do we want to remember? What do we want to try to do? And write down just one simple thing. Let's look at number 2, because remember, it's not just one thing, it's 7. And by the way, these don't come overnight. This is a womb to tomb scenario. It's never too late for us to learn them. They're the same ones that work for big people as well as little people. But it doesn't make any difference which ones are your child's strengths. And it's a rare kid that has all. But number 2 is empathy. And we learned that very strongly during COVID. We learned all of a sudden that empathy is not soft and fluffy. It's transformational. And those of us who didn't have healthy relationships, it was the top reason why our mental health began to plummet and stress and depression went up. It does not mean that your child has to have 50,000 buddies, but social competence is highly correlated to resilience. It means that he knows who to go to. Maybe it's grandma, maybe it's the counselor, maybe it's his best friend down the end of the block. When he really is feeling a little stressed, he knows he's got some glue people who will support him. Here's some other things about empathy that I want you to be aware of. Empathy, our children are born with it. They're hardwired for it. But unless we cultivate it, it lies dormant. And one of the most dismal things I discovered is that empathy has actually dropped prior to COVID by 40% in the last 30 years. Then came COVID. Now, when you're looking at me going, what the heck happened? We started giving trophies out for kids for just breathing. We started giving them scritch dippers for, you're doing a great job, sweetie pie. We started thinking that it was all about self-esteem. when in reality, we now know it's confidence, not self-esteem that matters. And the second thing is we need to start raising our kids to be we kind of people, not me kind of people. If we do and don't have them just looking at a cell phone the entire time, we'll begin to see that the child has a trajectory towards empathy. So let's just look at some simple things that are golden that we can do to boost our children's empathy level. Says Harvard, empathy, number 2 is a trait. The top employability skill that employers are now looking for in the 21st century. It is highly correlated. Number 2, what you're looking for is the gateway to empathy is emotional literacy. You can't feel with another person unless you can turn and go, she looks upset, or daddy sounds frustrated, voice tone, or look at how mom's standing. She looks kind of like she's really, really tired. Our children, when you look down at a screen all the time, don't learn emotional literacy. And emotional literacy is the gateway to one of the best ways to reduce stress, but also the gateway to be able to help a child learn just how to get along with others. Here's some other things about why empathy is so critical. We know, yes, it's top employability factor, but we also know that it's one of the best ways to stop hate, and it's one of the best antidotes to cyberbullying. We now know that if you have empathy off the screen, you're far more likely to have empathy on the screen and not start sending those cyber attacks to other of your friends or colleagues. So here's some other points when you go, so what do I do? Number 1 is start talking feelings to your kids, particularly to your sons. Yale says we do a far better job with our daughters, even at age 2, than we do with our 2-year-old sons. And when I'm talking talk feelings, I'm not talking about hire a tutor and getting a program. I'm talking as you're watching Inside Out. I'm talking as you go, look at your dad. How does his face look right now? Do you think now is the time to ask for an allowance? Start just talking naturally. Point out feelings, point out emotions. Number 2, do you have digital unplugged times where you have sacred times when you as a family can just sit and talk and bond together when everyone's cell phone is off, including yours? 66% of American kids say we, the grown-ups, are the ones too plugged in, not them. So maybe you go, okay, it's going to be dinner hour, or maybe it's during the family time, or maybe it's in the carpool when the kid's locked in there with you for conversation. That's when everyone's phone is off, including yours. How about putting it in a drawer and making it be a safe place where just during this time, it's our time together? By the way, one of the causes of stress is sleep deprivation. Your middle school kids in particular are having a tough time with it. And one of the things we now know is the deadliest thing to bring to sleep with you is your phone. You don't need your phone at night. Put it outside in a box and turn it off. And when your kid goes, how do I know when to get up? Do your child a glorious favor. Go to Target and buy an alarm clock. Say, look, sweetie, here's how to set it and here's how to go. Now let's look at some other things. Other ideas on boosting empathy. It isn't one thing, but it's a few things. Do you know reading wonderful children's literature selections is highly correlated to empathy. You want to boost your own empathy? Literary fiction. And I'm not talking 50 Shades of Grey, guys. I'm talking like All the Light You Cannot See or Bel Canto. Different things like that when you step into the shoes of someone beside yourself. Look at the books your children are exposed to. If you have sons, then let them read books about the other gender. Let them look at all different kinds of races and cultures. You're more likely to empathize with those like you. Step outside your comfort zone. Help your child exposing them to differences. By the way, you don't have to agree with what the person says. Cognitive empathy, perspective taking, is stepping into somebody's shoes but listening to where they're coming from. Please don't think you have to agree, but try to hear where they're coming from to the end result. That's wonderful. Why do you think Wonder and Harry Potter are 2 of the most popular books for kids across the world? Because they're literary fiction. One other thing, ask the question feels plus needs. Start when they're 2 and keep on going. You can't ask the question unless they know emotions. But the more you talk emotions with your child and point them out, the better. Now you go one step more. Maybe you're reading the book. How would you feel if that happened to you? What would you need if that were you? As your child gets a little older, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, they start to realize cognitive behaviors, and we're looking at perspective taking comes in. Flip it. That is not just how would you feel, but how do you think your friend feels? Or how do you think that character feels? What do you think he needs? What can we do to make a difference? Final thing. One of the easiest things you can do to boost empathy is keep a box by your back door. Call it your family charity box. Your kids can decorate it. And every time you're done with the book or the toy or the backpack or whatever it is, you gently put the games inside the box or the books. And then when it's filled, each time it's filled, it becomes our family charity box. Together as a family, bring it and donate it to some cause that you care about. Every child, every kid I've interviewed who's really empathetic said, I'm so glad my parents did that. Because when I gave it to that man, it was the look in his eye. I get teary-eyed just thinking about the kids, the stories that they tell me. When I realized that I was making a difference, I had to do it again and again and again. Empathy, it's a superpower. What's the one thing you want to remember? That's number 2. Number 3, notice we're just putting the word self-control. This is the one that I think every child and grown-up in the world needs right now. It's how to put the brakes on impulses, how to think straight and regulate. And that is a teachable tool, teachable skill. So how do you help your child learn to manage stress? Look, stress is going to be part of our kids' lives. Stress is part of this world. But as the stress is allowed to build and they don't have a healthy way to tune it down, that's why 77,000 American pediatricians signed a form saying our children are in a state of national crisis. We have never seen mental health needs this high. But they're also saying, why aren't we teaching them healthy ways to calm down? And there's simple things to do. Here's idea number 1. Please, first of all, don't just say you're the one that needs it, sweetie. Do it as a whole family, because the best way to teach a skill, remember this the rest of your life, parent, is not telling your child it or reading about it in a book or doing a worksheet about it. It's showing your child and modeling the skill. That's why if you do it as a family or you point somebody else out doing it, the child is more likely to copy it. Start by step number 1, even before you start teaching a couple of these skills that I'll suggest, is watch your child. Watch your child a little closer before the meltdown. And you'll see each child's different, just like you is different. You'll see the same predictable pattern in the child's behavior that you may be missing. Maybe what you're going to do on number 3 is watch my kid a little closer and watch each child a little closer with another index card. For instance, you'll see a steady progression. They're not stressed all the time. But first of all, you can even track your child on a calendar. Don't let your kid know you're doing this. But when's the time that child is most irritable or most angry or least focused? If you track it on a calendar, the time and the date and the place the child is at, whether it's home or at school or on the soccer field or in a daycare, you'll go, oh my gosh, it's always at 11 o'clock on this particular time. What's going on? That's the time he goes to that daycare. Maybe that isn't the best setup for my child. Or, oh my gosh, it's only at 3 o'clock every afternoon. What's going on? He may have missed the nap, or he's coming home hungry from school and he needs a nutritious nap. You'll begin to see a pattern. There's always a pattern in stress, parents. Don't miss the pattern. The second thing is look at not the triggers, that's what's causing it, but look at the signs. Watch your child a little closer, because you'll see the same sign before they become very irritable, or before the voice goes a little louder, or before she starts to cry, or before she gets clingy. Some kids, by the way, middle school kids, a lot of them are saying headaches, and it isn't because they're ill. It's because the stress is building. You'll see some kids, their tummy starts to go up and down like this. Watch some kids, you can see with their hands almost every time. Watch it. It's subtle. It may be in their pockets. Tween girls say a lot of times they go like this, or their little feet start to go up and down and up and down. Every kid is different. The biggest mistake we do, this is toy store aisle number 1 around the holidays. And you see the kid in the middle of the exorcism because he didn't get the toy and the mother's saying, calm down. And you want to say it's a little late. If you wait until the meltdown, you've lost it. Instead, what you want to do is help your child. Maybe that's your goal for the next 21 days. Tune into each other. By the way, go home and ask your kid what your sign is. Right before you get mad, Mom, you do that weird thing with your eyes. They know our signs. They don't know theirs. But once you know the sign, that is just a blessing, because now you can begin to teach skills. And that's your next phase. You see, I'm offering a lot of strategies here. I don't want you to try them all or you'll never get success. But if you tune into one thing and you do them in order of, okay, first I'm going to look at the sign. Second, maybe what I'm going to do is now I'm going to create a calm down corner in my home, not for time out, but for time in. Once you start to see your child needs a little more just decompressing, maybe when everybody's calm, everybody in the family can start putting together a thing that I need in my own bedroom, or that's for a bigger kid. But for a little kid, it could be right by the dining room table or a beanbag chair by the family room. And now you stock it with what you know will help your child. Ask him or her, what do you need to help you? For a little one, it's going to be my teddy bear or my blankie. As you get older, Natalie would say it's Mozart on my iPad, and I'm going to make sure my iPad is available there. But I also have some kids say it's fidgets that I can go back and forth on. You can buy those at Target as well. But maybe there's some kids that helps. For some children, it could be, believe it or not, a book. They get into a book and they know that every time I pick up a book, I can just kind of lose myself for a while. What helps your child calm down? You're not going to have that answer tonight. But maybe over the next month, every child puts together, and I'm going to do my own calm down corner in my bedroom. And what will happen is you can simply say, looks like you need a little chill for just a little bit. Why don't you go to your calm down corner? Not for time out, but for time in. The next final thing you want to do is teach your child how to calm down without the blanket, without the pillow, because maybe it's recess time. Maybe he's riding the school bus. Maybe he's having a problem over at his friend's house. And there's a few strategies that you can do. So let me just share the best thing I've ever learned in my life. I've had really an honor to be able to work on a lot of places around the world. But one place that changed my life was the Army hiring me to work on Army bases to train ASEX counselors in PTSD for children and soldiers. But while I was there, the commander said, you should go talk to the Navy SEALs, because we are changing their training, the most elite forces in the world. Middle school, this is going to work really well if you have a son. Say, this is what the most elite forces do to help them get through the toughest challenges you can imagine. And what they do, each month, they do something else. The first thing is they do exactly what I asked you to do first. They take a moment to identify their own unique stress signs. They point it out to each other. This is an upbeat thing when each one goes, I know it's my stomach. I know I go like this. I know I can feel my teeth start to grind. Once they know their stress sign, they immediately say, chill out. Inside their head, relax. They come up with one word, but they self-talk themselves into, you got this, start relaxing or start breathing. And then hang into this, because if you don't learn anything else from tonight, listen to this. What we then do is do a 1-2 breath. And it is the fastest way we know. And by the way, we know this from Madison, Wisconsin and UC Berkeley, when they have actually looked at the brains of Navy SEALs. They're looking at the part where their brain is on compassion and self-control, because they've been practicing 1-2 breathing. It's actually expanded and rewired their brain. And it's just because the moment the stress comes in, relax. I take a slow, deep breath from deep in my stomach. Close my eyes, turn around so my friends don't see me, and take the breath up to here. I can't tell you how relaxed I am from that one breath. I now hold it, and I'm going to let it out. This is key. My exhale is twice as long as my inhale. It's a 1-2 breath. You don't take one. You don't take two. You take as many as you need. And you practice and practice till you got it. And you're saying, but I have a younger child. Then you do elbow. You have your child go back to back with you. So their back is against your back so they can feel it. Remember, you show them, don't tell them. You lock arms on elbows and you say, now watch mommy or watch daddy. Watch me. Make your breath go just like me. You practice back and forth and back and forth, and pretty soon your child will be able to do it without you. For a child who's really visual, as you go on a nature walk, you pull a flower and you say, here's what you do. It's like you smell the flower. They need a visual device. Now pretend you're at a birthday party and you're blowing out your birthday candle. You keep practicing till they don't need the flower and the candle. But what'll happen, parents, is they finally, because you've given them a calm down corner, you've slowly helped them identify what their stress signs are. You've given them lots of possibilities to practice. And if you have a child who breathes too quickly, do a couple of points. Get a feather and put it on the top of a table, or put a straw on the top of a table. No, don't breathe so quickly, sweetie. Breathe real slowly. See if you can breathe so that blow the feather so it doesn't pop. Just goes straight across. Bubbles. Bubble blowing is really good for little ones. Blow your meanies away, but practice. Big, 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 big breath. Big, big, big breath. No, see how big the bubble is? Oh, not little ones. Big, big, big. What you're doing is you're teaching self-control. And you will be teaching your child one of the best strategies they will use the rest of their life, any place and anytime without you. The highest correlation, when somebody says to me, Michele, what's a thriver? I'd say it's a child who has agency. It's a child who doesn't wait for the parent to rescue them. It's a child who doesn't wait for somebody to do it for them. It's a child who's learned the skill because they practice and practice and practice and practiced until finally they can do it without you. What do you want to remember about? Self-control. Those are the 3 that I think are the core ones that you want to work on. Let's touch on the next 4. A little briefer and a little quicker. Again, each item in each chapter has dozens of strategies you can use, but integrity is another piece of resilience. I was pleasantly surprised to see how high it kept coming up, because integrity is the piece that helps a child know what I stand for. Who am I and what I believe? Because sometimes, particularly as you get a little older, bullying or peer pressure can be huge. And a child may be up against being pushed to do something that he knows is not part of him. The more you parent can help that child know, here's who we are as a family, the more you'll help your child when the challenge comes be able to say no or carry on. So let's look at integrity for just a minute, because I think it's a wonderful thing. And I got the best story that I've ever heard. When I was writing Thrivers, I was interviewing, like I told you, dozens of kids, dozens of them. I went to Florida and I was at a high school. And I asked the teachers, is there anybody here, a kid who I should be interviewing who's got integrity? Every single teacher said, Mia, done. Go find out how she got that way. So I pull this precious kid aside and say, okay, Mia, every teacher says I have to find out how you got the integrity. And she laughs and she said, oh, that's easy. I said, why? She says, oh, it was how I was raised. I said, okay, fess up. How were you raised to have such integrity? She said, I'll never forget this. Put this down on your list for some time to do it if you haven't done this, parent. It's so powerful. She said, I must have been about 6 when my dad and mom called me and my 2 younger brothers into the family room. I walk in and there's all this chart paper and marking pens all over the floor. And Dad said, have a seat. We're going to discuss what kind of family we want to be remembered for. What kind of family do you want to be remembered for? God, what a great question. Dad said there aren't any right or wrong answers, but we're going to write down the kind of terms that we want people to remember us for, or what we think really matters most to our family. Mom's going to write them down. And then when we run out of room, we're going to vote. I said, well, that was real easy. She said, it really was. We started coming up with words. I said, like what? Like awe, like compassion and responsibility and trustworthy and respectful and kind. And Mom kept writing them down until Dad said, okay, we got too many. Let's vote. I said, what'd you choose? She said, fascinating. We all chose honesty. I said, so how did you remember it, Mia? Remember this one, parent. She said, it was impossible not to. My mother must have said it 50 times a day. She'd drop us off at school. Remember, we're the honest duns. My dad turned it into a plaque, we're the honest duns, and made it into a wooden plaque and put it by the mailbox. We're the honest duns. And my mom and dad kept talking about it naturally. This is not a lecture. When we'd watch TV, my mom would say, wow, those guys were really honest duns, weren't they? As we're reading a book, I think those guys were honest duns. We'd do something wrong, she'd weave it into discipline. Was that an honest done thing to do? My parents said it so much, we became it. So my question to you is, what are you saying so much that your kids become? And that's how you instill conscience in your children. We're looking in a world where character is kind of vaporizing. One of the best ways to learn character and integrity is through examples. Mia would also say that her mom and dad amplified honesty. What are you really emphasizing in your own family? What do you stand for? Or maybe you can take a moment to ask yourself one other question. Pretend it's 40 years from now. What are the traits you want to see most in your children? What are the traits? And I'm talking about, I'm not happy and successful. I'm talking about character strengths. Those are the ones that endure for a lifetime. If you are intentional about those now, parents, and you write them down, I don't care what you choose, but you write them down, you will find dozens of ways, just like the Duns did, to weave it into their everyday conversations until their children became it. That's number 4. Number 5, one of my favorites, curiosity. Now, what does curiosity have to do with resilience? A lot. And I want you to take a moment to look at the 7 for just a minute, because there's another hint. Just keep this up for a minute, because many of you are going to say, what's the most important of those? What should I do first? Do what you think your family and your child needs for most. But here's another point. Each time you really push a strength, and you're going to get a list of the skills that build each one of those strengths later. That's how Thrivers is also set up. You'll also see that when you push, for instance, empathy and curiosity together, they become superpowers. If you have self-control and curiosity together, that's going to give your child a far better longevity in terms of motivation. It isn't one strength that matters, but 2 or 3 together, they have what's called a multiplier effect. How do you teach curiosity? I am not suggesting that curiosity means you got to raise an Albert Einstein kind of a kid. But we do know that curiosity is one of the skills, the strengths that Fortune 500 company says our children will need in the real world more than anything else. How do you boost it? Let's talk about for a minute how we're reducing it. Remember back when your kids were toddlers or 4 and 5? We now know, because NASA's been studying our kids at every age, 4s and 5s and 3s and 2s are natural points where children are most curious. Everything comes out of their mouth is why this, why that, and it's gloriously wonderful. Everything that they do, by the way, nurtures curiosity. Sandbox, open-ended ideas, finger painting, and then things become a little bit more rigorous. And then one other little thing that we do that robs them of resilience and curiosity, watch out. We start solving our kids' problems for them. We start saying, it's okay, sweetie, I'm going to do this for you. I know it's easier, and I know it takes less time if you do it, but we're discovering something. Each time you solve a child's problem, you rob him of resilience, because skills need to be practiced. So what are you going to do instead? This is real simple. You're going to make a new rule. And the first thing is, one of the best skills to boost curiosity is really simple to teach, from little ones to bigger ones: brainstorming. The moment kid comes home, or the moment he has a problem around the house, the first thing you just simply ask is, what's bugging you, sweetie? Keep a poker face. Whatever it is, he's going to say it. And you go, well, thanks for telling me. Let's figure out how to solve that problem. If you have a little critter, you take out his hand and it becomes a pocket problem solver. It's great for kindergarten and first grade. Thumbkin is, what's the problem? Now, 3 things you could have done differently. Name it, from pointer, middleman, and ringman. What are other things you could have done? And now keep thinking about those. Get rid of those. And what's the one you want to try? Good idea. You are helping your child storm his brain of possibilities. As you get older, a 1-minute sand timer is a real gift, because what you can begin to do with a child is, at this point, an older one, name the problem. And then you start, okay, that's the problem. The answer is inside your head. You got to come up with plan B, sweetie. But we're going to just storm your head until you can come up with another idea. And each time you come up with an idea, I could write the idea down, or I could just tally the idea. And I love when you do that, because each time you tally the day, the next day, the next day, he begins to see he's coming up with more ideas because he's storming his brain. Then what you do is you stop and you say, now let's get rid of anything on the list that's not safe, wise, or responsible, or part of our rules at home. Which ones are you most comfortable doing? And then you choose one. And here's what you want to also do. Thanks. I see you're comfortable choosing that idea. Take a moment with a little kid to role play. What's the new way look like? What's the new way of asking your friend for a turn? Well, I'll be the friend and you be me. Now you flip it around, or you be you and I'll be the other guy. Or you can do it with your teddy bear or the dog. Little kids learn best through role playing. Practice and practice till they're comfortable doing it. With a bigger kid, you simply say, so what's the plan look like? What's your plan B? When are you going to do it? And where are you going to try it? When and where are the two things that are wonderful. You can also have some really good conversations in your home. Anytime you want to have a conversation, we're finding that many of our children are becoming risk adverse during COVID. They're afraid to think outside the box. They're afraid to come up with a dissension, or I don't know if this is the right answer. Teachers have been telling me this. Harvard and Yale are telling me this. So here's the point. You can have simple conversations for like fourth grade on up, family meetings or dinner hours. Let's have a conversation. What would you like to talk about? Or what do you disagree upon? Assert yourself. That's A. But give me a reason why you have that opinion that's different than mommy and dad. And then give me E, evidence. Tell me why. I want to warn you about this, parent, because we're raising a population of kids that can ask Siri or Alexa for any answer. You're dealing with a population of kids that go to Google and say, here's what the answer is. Find other sources. The more you have conversations like this, how wonderful for a child to become a deeper and deeper thinker. Okay, now you're going down 5 levels. And all you do for a little one is say, okay, that's an idea. Convince me you're right. Convince me. Just tell me why. What you do is you're getting a child who's more curious and open-ended. And that's what you're looking for. There's a lot of other ideas to boost curiosity. Those are the easy ones. Let's go to what you're all worried about. Number 6 is perseverance. That's that grit that says, I'm going to keep going, Mom. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep on trying. And this is the one I'm hearing a lot of you worrying about, because our kids are regressing a little bit in their focusing ability. Are you finding the same with yourself? Yeah. When stress builds, your capacity or for hanging in there lowers if the demand's too high. So the first thing about perseverance is, make sure your expectations match your child right now, not where he should be because of his age, but where he is. Then you do it like a rubber band. Your goal is to gently stretch your child, figure out what his ability is. If you don't know, ask the teacher. How much time should he be able to spend on this project? How many words should he be getting right? How long should he be working? And then gently stretch him one step more. Let's look at some other possibilities, because each one of these 7 traits has highly based on research from thousands of children in some of the best research facilities in the world. When we come to perseverance, the best researcher in the world, besides Angela Duckworth, is Carol Dweck. And Carol Dweck looked at our kids and said, what makes a successful kid? Why do some kids persevere? And she found it has nothing to do with IQ and GPA. It's the mindset that the child has. And the mindset is, I'm going to keep working on this. I'm going to keep doing this because I know this is a growth mindset. If I keep working and keep working and keep working, the more I work, I'll get better and better. A fixed mindset child is a kid who goes, it's just too hard, or I don't have the right zip code, or I don't have a strong enough GPA, or I don't have the skill set. And so they're more likely to quit. Carol Dweck also said, parent, you make an enormous difference on your child. on how you respond to your child. Watch your responses. First thing is, let mistakes be permissible in your home because everybody makes them. If you're really working hard, you're going to make them. If you don't make a mistake, it means you're not working hard enough. But the key we're looking for is, what are you going to do next time? Feel free to mention your own mistakes, but say, but here's what I learned and here's what I'll do next time. That itself is a learning tool. The second thing is, go back to Carol Dweck. She said a big mistake we do is always emphasize what you get. In fact, when they come home, the first question we ask is what you get, or how many did you get wrong, or what was your grade? She says that's a major mistake. She said instead is, where were you yesterday? Where were you now? If you keep stressing the child's effort, you're working harder and harder and harder, what begins to happen is the child begins to realize, I got this, I'll keep working and I'll get better. Now let's go to something and let's go to one step more. Because the big thing I'm also seeing, so much to just unpack on all of this, but I want you to just keep thinking of a lot of different ways because so many of your kids are at different levels. But one thing we're also seeing with kids with the stress building is feeling overwhelmed with everything. I can't do this. I don't know where to start. And so what you do for some children is take the page and say, you start with the first row or you start with the first problem. When they see the whole project, they're overwhelmed. Start with the one. Here's another idea, just so you can tell your older kids. When they come home with homework and they're stressed, they keep thinking about the hardest part of the homework. And so they put it off and put it off. Teach your child to do the hardest thing first. Because what happens is they'll get it done, even though it's a pain in the neck. But the rest of it has become easy and they won't be so stressed thinking about it. They can devote more energy into the rest of the tasks. One final little thing. I learned this from way back when my mother said I had to learn piano. And I had this horrible piano teacher named Mr. White. I remember him to this day because Mr. White had something that Carol Dweck would say was an absolute wrong way to teach a kid any skill, whether it's piano, math, science, baking. Mr. White would say, play the piece, Michele, but as soon as you get to a mistake, I don't care if it's one bar from the end, you got to start all over again. You got to make sure there's no mistakes. What happened was all I could think about was the mistake. And that's what's happening to a lot of your kids. All they're thinking about is the hard part. Thank heavens for Mrs. Thompson. My mom hired her as my next piano teacher, and she had a whole different philosophy. Carol Dweck would say, right on. Carol Dweck and Mrs. Thompson. Michele, you look so stressed about this. What you worried about? Oh, that one little piece, that one little bar. Well, let's just keep practicing that one little section right there over and over and over and over and over. Oh gosh, Michele, now you got it. Really good coaches don't say give up on soccer. Really good coaches show the kid, well, here's the video. It looks like your foot's going wrong. They don't try to help every part of the child's athletic ability, but let's look at one little piece at a time. Let's practice that one little piece or that division or that how you're learning to write the D, make it go the other way, or the piano piece. Perseverance is breaking it down into little nuggets and reinforcing the effort. What do you want to remember about perseverance? The last one, we're almost there. If you've got questions, I'm going to take those next. And if you want questions, you're going to be putting those into the chat room, or you can just verbally say them on a microphone. But number 7, I think is what every person in the whole world needs right now. Optimism and hope. We know it's a huge part of resilience. And that is why I don't care when you start optimism, we've got to help instill it in our children. I am not saying raise Pollyannas. Please don't get me wrong on that one, because we've got to give our kids a reality base that this has been a tough time. The reality is, yeah, COVID has been hard. We've all been hit by it. But we also know something that's very essential, parents. I want you to remember this the rest of your parenting career, that optimism is teachable. And we've actually been tracking children starting at age 7. Those little guys who are a little more anxious or a little more stressed, University of Pennsylvania has been tracking them as throughout the years. And if they don't have a way to talk back to a worry or keep the pessimism from eroding their sense of hope, stress and anxiety build, and those are forefront kids who go into depression later. So let's rewind this and let's look at some simple little things you can do as parents, as teachers, as grandparents. Simple ideas. Number one is remember that pessimism is part of life, but if it becomes permanent, pervasive, and personal, it's going to erode your child's hope. And they need hope, because if they don't have hope, it's a why bother, mom? Why bother, dad? The first thing you can do in your home, don't try all of these, but try this. Do you have an upbeat mantra in your home? So that if you make a mistake, what do you say out loud? For instance, you just blew the baking. What do you say? Oh, next time, oh boy, I blew this, but that's okay. Next time that's one way you can handle it. The next thing you can do is maybe something really dismal comes up. That's okay. I'll get through it. That's okay. Maybe it happens to your family. One of the things that many parents have said is that we have a mantra that says we're strong. We'll get through it. We can do it. Not all of these, but we've discovered something very powerful. If you say a mantra, maybe it's I'll get through it, or we're strong, or we got this, one thing only, and you say it enough, and you say it enough so your kid eavesdrops on you, power parent, your voice becomes your child's inner voice. And now what they have is something to counter the pessimism. I got this. Don't let the negativity erode the child. A second thing that I love, just an idea, have a little family talk, but talk about how you as a family are resilient, starting with backwards to grandparents and great grandparents. Talk about it. NYU found that if you talk to your child about, hey, I know this is tough, but you know what our great grandparents got through? You know what my grandparents got through? Maybe it's World War II or World War I or whatever they went through, or Ebola or polio or whatever. What happens is the child begins to see his family as a resilient family. That sounds so simple, but we got this because we've got through this before and we bounce back, and that's who we are together. A third thing that I think is absolutely essential is please watch the news. Please. This is an era of children that is seeing the most dismal news possible. Nonstop dismal news, from mass shootings to George Floyd's murder to Ukrainian war feeds. Yeah, when we were growing up, we heard about it. Maybe we read about it, but the images weren't so visual and vivid. And what we now know, NYU, is that those images, the visual images, can haunt your child. And if they keep seeing that image, they begin to see the world as a mean, scary place. It's called mean world syndrome. George Gerber, one of the best psychologists we've got, says that robs your child of hope and optimism. But you can counter that. You can't change the world, parent, but you can change the news your child is seeing or hearing. One of the coolest things that a group of Long Island kids told me they did, high school kids. We got so tired, Dr. Borba, of just hearing about the bad stuff. We convinced our superintendent to buy a great big huge plasma TV and put it in the middle of the quad. I said, what's on the TV? He said, when we walk in, that's the first thing we see every day. And I said, and what's on the TV? He said, don't worry, it's good stuff. The superintendent is finding images, wonderful, and they're out there. There are dozens of them. Children doing great things, good stuff that's happening. Any crisis, I don't care if it's an earthquake, a fire drill, whatever the crisis is, watch for the good guys. Mr. Rogers said, to raise my kids, my mom always said, look for the helpers. Are you showing your children that the world is a good place, that people rally? And that's what they're doing. Many parents go one step more with that. They cut out the news, good stuff. Go to Google and you can go to goodnews.com and you can cut out news. And every night they paste it on a index card and they just talk about it each night before the child goes to bed. Did you hear about those kids? Or could be around the dinner hour. Optimism is teachable. I think we all are at a point where we need to step into our children's shoes and go, what kind of a world are we presenting to our kids? They need to see the world as a good place. I know there's the reality of some bad stuff is happening, but in all shape and form, there's a lot of empathy happening. And that's what I want you to remember above all else. And that's number 7, optimism and hope. There's so many other things you can do, but I want you to do one final little thing. When your brain is still kicking in there and you wrote down hopefully some ideas on there, is there one thing that kicked in and you said, gosh, I really think that we should be doing that as a family? It makes no difference what your choice is. And don't go copying the person sitting next to you. Instead, go, that's what our family needs. That's what I'm buying into. Maybe it's good news reports. Don't do it once. Don't do it once. You do it over and over and over and until it becomes a habit. And what we're finding is that if you do it enough, your kids actually start looking for the good news. Or maybe you like self-control. I'm going to start helping my kids set up a calm down corner. And if you do it over and over again and you don't buy this stuff, your kids are the ones that are setting up their own calm down corner. What happens is pretty soon your child would go, I think I just need some space, Mom. I'm going to go sit in the calm down corner. The amazing thing is that's exactly what University of Chicago, Yale, and Harvard said our kids need when they go away to college. Things to help them soothe. There's so many things you can try. Maybe it's a healthy hobby, anything. But it's one thing you want to try. I want you to write that one down on that star. And while you're thinking, just a couple other little points, and then I'm going to look at your questions that you have. First, commit to one thing. And it may be something I didn't mention. Maybe it's something that's rolling around in your head going, oh my gosh, we used to do that a long time ago. Or that's something my mom and dad used to do that maybe we should be doing as a family. Resilient children almost always have 3 things going, and not necessarily all 3. But the first thing they have is people in their lives, you. They're caring champions who refuse to give up on them. The teacher, the counselor, the Boys and Girls Club leader, the Girl Scout director, the parent, the grandparent. Who are the people who are models of resilience, who you want your child to look up to and know they're there for you? People are always there, and they don't need bunches of them, but 1 or 2. The second thing is a place that they can go to and just breathe, decompress. They may be stressed from when they walk in that door. Where are they going to when they walk in? Maybe it's that beanbag. Maybe it's blowing those bubbles. Maybe it's listening to Mozart, or maybe it's other places. They know they can go to their girlfriend's house, or they know that they can go to the Girl Scouts. Is there places that you know build your child up? But the third thing that we sometimes have been overlooking on this, in a GPA test-driven world, we also need to make sure that our children have protective buffers. And that's what we've been talking about today. The seeds of resilience are skills. They're skills that are practiced until the child can do it without you. By the way, other myths about resilience. It's not a program, so relax. You do not have to buy one more thing. Instead, you ask yourself, what's the one little thing, a minute or 2 a day, I can model and keep modeling it till my child has it. It's not locked into DNA, and it's not locked into temperament. It's not locked into age. It's never too late for us as well as our kids. It is an uncertain, accelerated, fast-paced world. You don't know what's going to be next along the pike. We do know that 1 in 4 of our children will experience some kind of a traumatic event. Which one of them are going to be able to bounce back? They've got those protective buffers. So keep in mind, you've got this too. Be calm. I know it's hard, but the most important thing you've got to remember is if you stay calm, that mirrors over to your child, and your child will be able to, Mom and Dad got it. I got it too. If you want anything else, I just suggest you go to Thrivers, and please don't read the whole book. Go to maybe the test that says, which are my children's strengths or weaknesses? And then look through and go, there's the one thing I want to do, and that's the one idea I want to try. I'm going to turn this back to you, and thank you so much for your attentiveness. I'm open for any questions you've got as long as you need them.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Borba, from all of us here and our audience. If you're at home, if you want to put your question into the chat box, and then I will read it to Dr. Borba.
Thank you.
those here in the audience, if you want to come up, you can ask your question directly. Okay, the first question I have is, how do you see school and families partnering on teaching the 7 essential character traits?
Oh, yay. A lot. And I find that what's happening is that schools, when a school is teaching many of these skills, they have SEL programs. If a child is learning one of these skills in the classroom, please reinforce the same thing at home. That's the best thing that I can see going. They really are partnering together. The second thing is many schools are becoming what I now call a thriver school. They're taking one strength a month. And then as a school, they're figuring one skill a month and they're reinforcing it about 5 minutes a day. And kids are learning those skills. They're putting it on their website. The coolest thing I'm seeing, Sandra, is that they're called Thriver Squads. They're for 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th grade. What they're doing there is they're a team of kids, like a club. They meet once a week at lunchtime. The counselor leads the group and the kids video themselves teaching how to learn the skill. And when I walk into classrooms, the kids are on the smart board teaching the kids the skills. And the kids are so engaged and attentive because there's my friend. She's teaching me the skill, so I'm going to learn the skill together. The final thing I see is a lot of book clubs are starting up where they're reading Thrivers or any other book together. So they're partnering up because parenting is becoming a very lonely occupation here. But if you find one other like-minded parent and you do it together, or you've got similar aged friends of your kids, you can do the same thing and you can be reinforcing when your child's friend is at your house or vice versa. Lots of possibilities are happening. There's no right or wrong. Thank you for the question, though. Oh, thank you for some of your ideas that are coming in for the chat room. I thank you for your thank yous. I just wish I were there in person with you.
Oh, no, this is great. Thank you. My question is, you hit home at the last one, optimism.
Yeah.
Goodnews.com. I'm a little Pollyanna-ish, as you referred to, but my son is very negative. I call him half empty. But how do I know the difference between if he's being negative or just a realist, or maybe I'm too optimistic? Like it bothers me because sometimes he does look at things half empty instead of half full. Like he focuses on the negatives instead of the positives.
I love the question because the first thing is you've already got part of the answer. Oh, you can't change here. And here's why. This is to all of you. I don't care what the question is. The first thing you do is you start tuning into your child's behavior and you track it. You tune into one thing, and it may be the negativity. Now ask yourself, is it attention getting, or is he really doing it because it's become a pattern? Is it all the time? Is it when he's playing soccer and when he's doing the math and when he's watching TV, or is it just in certain levels of patterns? What we do know, I would strongly suggest you just tune into that you need to slowly start helping any kid, all of our children, start learning how to talk back to negative talking. Because if they don't, what happens is the pattern becomes, the pessimism starts to erode. There are going to be times when your child deserves to be negative. He's going to say something and yep, he's darn right on what's happening. And so you're going to write, it's really tough, but let's look for something positive that happened. And that may mean that you want to start with the good news reports or reading books about characters who spin optimism around. There's wonderful books. In Thrivers, each chapter also has children's literature selections by each grade level and things you can choose to read, or go to a good librarian. They're a godsend. I've got a 5-year-old and I want some books on positivity. Give me some ideas, and start reading those and watch how he responds. Then you slowly can rebuild it. Remember, this is not overnight because he may have had, 10 years to build up that behavior. So you slowly start switching it out. And final thing to all of you, don't try to do this alone. Pass on your plan to the teacher or the babysitter or the grandparent or the spouse. If you can have at least one other person involved with it, you don't see the kid 24/7, but somebody else sees them a little bit, you can start reinforcing the same thing where the child isn't with you. That makes a difference. And I thank Michele. Thank you. I'm looking at some of your chats coming up.
Thank you. Thank you for coming up.
Can you guess which child?
I have one more question. You had
Yes.
mentioned it at the end. You started talking about some of the barriers or some of the things that get in the way of attaining these skills. What are some of the other things? Like you talked about the news, you mentioned that one, and you mentioned phones.
Two things that are really interesting that we overlook. And that is, we are seeing, I don't know if you've seen it, but just let me tell you what every other parent is telling me, regression in our kids. Little bit more behavior problems, or a little less socially, a little more social angst or anxiety, a little more less motivated. That's natural and normal because of stress. And that means that the skill the child needed to be a little more outgoing, like hello, hi, how are you, hasn't been exercised nearly enough. So the first thing we may overlook is that you may have taught a skill, but our mistake is not practicing it nearly enough so the child can do it without you. What you want is the skill to be sustained, which is why I said pass it on to somebody else. Pass it on so somebody else is reinforcing it, even if it's once a week for 5 minutes. The second thing is the environment. Are they in an environment, and I'm not talking about your home, but I'm talking about other spots where they have an opportunity to practice these skills, or they're seeing other kids who are also have resilient possibilities, or they're doing these skills, because you learn the skills. This is my 5th time I'm saying it, by seeing it, not hearing it. So sometimes it's exposing kids to other kids who become models, or are you modeling it yourself nearly enough? Those are just a few things that we're seeing. We're obviously seeing that when stress really builds and your child doesn't have stress, ways to have coping strategies to boost it down, the behavior will also get in the way, or motivation's going to get in the way because you can't focus, or you have negative thoughts of pessimism about yourself, or you just at a point where your attention span is far shorter than it could be. That said, all of these things are teachable. You just need to be intentional about what it is that your child needs right now and keep working and working and working at it till you see the change.
Well, we are so appreciative of your time, Dr. Borba. It really has been eye-opening. I think we're all ready to read the book, those of us that have not, and get started on some of these skills. So we really appreciate the time tonight. And those of you at home, thank you for logging in and enjoying this wonderful hour. We have a great audience here, so we're going to be talking a little bit after.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank best to all of you. Take care of yourself. We're going to get through this. And the goal is, let's make sure that we raise a just generation of kids who we call thrivers, kids who can handle life without us. That's the goal of good parenting anyway.
Thank you again.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you for the thank yous.